Hey guys, how's it going? Kripparrian here. Today I'm going to give you guys a bit of a rundown on a lot of the issues that a lot of people have been talking about and kind of my spin and understanding of them, which I think is pretty fair considering I've lived and breathed Hearthstone for the last 4 years almost at this point. I made a few comments on stream yesterday kind of to talk about why some of my YouTube content doesn't include a lot of the interesting things that it kind of had in the past and, generally what we experience when we try to play ranked mode in Hearthstone. So have a look and then I'll give you guys the rest.
What am I supposed to do to make constructed videos? Hey guys, how's it going? Kripparrian here. Today I played Pirate Warrior. It's a really cool deck. I played against other Pirate Warriors and Pirate Shamans. I won 51.2% of the time, which means this deck actually beats the meta. Hey guys, Kripparrian again. So I've been playing Pirate Shaman. Turns out Pirate Shaman is pretty good. This Pirate Shaman deck has got 52.1% win rate. It does really well against the other Pirate Shamans and Pirate Warriors. Sometimes you'd play against an odd Reno deck, but there really isn't any strategy. Because they're playing a Reno deck, they're not likely to have any actual good counters, so you just play around nothing and hope to win. You actually win about 51% of the time. See you guys tomorrow! Oh, and I have to put my face on the thumbnail. I gotta be and then crazy shaman deck beats crazy shaman decks, gone wild, gone sexual. That's how you get the views,
so that's
man.
Basically what's going on. Right now, ranked mode is a mix of very few decks that are played in gross amounts, and the experience that people have playing ranked mode is very stale, but not only that, it's very exclusive. You can't really, explore and make a new deck and really try it and expect to be successful, because you really just won't be. The current decks are far too dominant and end the game far too quickly. A lot of the main issues, I think, stem from the fact that games these days are just way too short. Now, we talked about aggro and all that kind of stuff all throughout Hearthstone history. I don't like aggro decks. There's no mystery to that. But it's not just about, aggro that I don't like and aggro being the problem. I think aggro has often been the problem in Hearthstone, but it is at a really critical stage right now in ranked play. It is so much that there are multiple decks out there that are being played very, wide amounts that aim to kill you between turns 3 and 5. Right? And sometimes you're actually playing things on these turns and you're still losing on turn 4 constantly against Pirate Warrior. And this idea of short games is one of the worst things possible in Hearthstone. Short games, I think, is the number one issue in Hearthstone right now. Short games are encouraged to play because you go through the ranks faster. If a deck that aims to close out the game in a very short time span is as good as the others, it will just be played more. But it's actually that the decks that kind of encourage short games are even better than the ones that don't. So obviously that is why everybody is playing them. We talk about Hearthstone having bad RNG, this and that, and we often blame the cards, but it isn't so much the cards as it is the length and duration of the games. If the game ends on turn 4, the RNG is through the roof. You're looking at, you looked at and drew 7 cards, So because you can't actually play a decent portion of your deck, because you're at the pure mercy of the opening hand RNG to win or lose when you're playing against one of these very aggressive decks, you're really not actually playing the game at all. You're rolling a dice, and if those cards just luckily happen to work out against your opponent, then great, you win. If not, then you lose. The short game aspect is the most fundamental to all the problems that Hearthstone experiences. I think aggro decks are in theory okay, though I have my frustrations with them on all levels. I think it is good design to have aggro at some point in the game, but I think aggro should kind of Yes, if you want to play an aggro deck, you're going to have an early game advantage most of the time. That's how you design the deck. And then, maybe you can lead off of that throughout the rest of the game. The traditional aggressive hunters, I think, kind of followed this. We're looking at about 2 years ago back in Hearthstone, where aggressive hunters would do a lot of face damage at the start of the game, and then would quickly fizzle out of playable cards, but they would usually win on like turn 7 or 8 through hero powers and just, minuscule slight damage draws. And that's kind of how an aggressive deck, in my opinion, should play, and certainly no faster than that. The short game thing is such a problem. Often the Hearthstone devs have talked about how, they don't want to limit design space and all that. Well, when the most dominant decks in the game end the game on turn 4 or have clearly lost the game on turn 4, don't you think that's the most design limiting aspect in the entire game? That you can't actually make cards with real impactful abilities that cost more than 4 mana? Don't you think that might be a problem? Yeah, that might be a little bit of a problem. Overall, this sets up a situation where short games are just not fun. They're not fun to play, they're not fun to win, they're not really fun to lose. It's just nothing. These are just coin flips. In the recent, talk and designer insights and all that crap, they talked about how, the meta is actually pretty balanced because the decks have like 51% win rate, 52% win rate, all that kind of crap. But it doesn't address the fun aspect, If you and I just flip a coin, heads I win, tails you win, well, that's perfectly balanced. But that's not something people are willing to pay hundreds of dollars every expansion to explore and experience. Balance doesn't actually matter as much as people think it does. What really matters is the enjoyment and the exploration of the game. And right now, there is zero exploration in Hearthstone, which is why, for someone like me, I don't have that many, concepts to give you guys. What am I going to do? Am I going to try some crazy new constructed deck that's actually going to beat the meta? No, the chance of that is basically zero, because that just cannot happen because of the current state that we're in. So what kind of pushes this state? So I think there's 2 main factors that cause this in the general scale. So first is 1-drops in this game are just far too powerful right now. When Hearthstone first came out, the main difference was that there were very few good 1-drops, and really there were class cards with pretty real disadvantages. Right now we have 1-drops that literally compete with 2-drops. 1-drops are about as good as 2-drops, and that basically breaks the game. It really does. You may not really understand it. It's like, oh, it's just, 1 more mana. If you compare a 5-drop to a 4-drop, well, it's just 1 more mana. It's slightly better. Some 4-drops trade for some 5-drops. That's certainly the design philosophy Blizzard has put into 1-drops versus 2-drops. But I can tell you that with a reasonable level of certainty, that is wrong. That is just simply not the way it should be. The reason is that if you play a 1-drop, and your opponent reacts to the 2-drop, but your 1-drop kills the 2-drop, it is half of the mana cost. In the early turns of the game, people are trying to really push as much of an early game advantage, and then they want to leverage the cards in their deck that win more. Every aggressive deck's design is win the early game in the cheesiest, most aggressive way possible, and then follow up with cards that are extremely powerful when you're already winning. And this is really the basic design for every single deck that's not Control, which these days means it's every single deck that's not Reno, and Reno doesn't have as much strategy as you have with just draw RNG when you're playing an aggressive deck. So yes, 1-drops are a real problem. If someone has a good 1-drop and the opponent only has a 2-drop, it trades and you play 2 1-drops, then what are you going to do? 2-drop for 2-drop? It doesn't work that way, 1-drops beating 2-drops is like 4-drops beating 8-drops. And you might think, Krip, that's not really fair because on turn 8, an 8-drop is... There is no turn 8. That's what you have to understand. The game is narrowly put in 4 turns. That's when the game basically ends for one player right now. So 1-drops literally cost half as much as 2-drops, and that's relevant because you can play twice as many. And the other really big issue with 1-drops is you cannot react to them. So a 1-drop minion that can compete with a 2-drop is basically a 2-drop that cannot be effectively answered. So if I play a 2-drop and you remove it with a 1-mana card, then, the player with removal with a reactive card kind of, was rewarded for including that card and waiting for it. But a proactive card always needs to be taken care of with removal more efficiently than the original cost. So because 1-drops trade with 2-drops, and there is no 0-mana removal except for some of the rogue cards, you literally cannot be punished for playing 1-drops. So that is the core of the problem in the entire game. That's what just screws over Arena every expansion, because they keep printing more and more powerful 1-drops. And yeah, that just sucks. The other aspect is cards are just not interesting. I feel like Blizzard is not actually taking risks or really designing very interesting cards anymore. They've really shown their dislike for combo cards, and while I can understand that, it feels like they've gone a little bit too far. It seems like, a class is in trouble and then they just print some just like stupid card to really help them out. So, cards are like a bit deceptive. This might seem a bit hypocritical because I review some of these cards, and of course I've been wrong on a lot of these cards in the past, but they're not going to print a card like this. They're not going to print a 1-mana 3/2 pirate that summons a 1/1 with charge, right? But it's going to be, if you have a weapon, and then if Patches is in the game, then yeah, it's exactly that card, right? So it's exactly that card. They made this card in the last expansion knowing that 1-drops are ridiculously problematic and instantly swing the game the moment they're played for aggressive decks. Yet this card exists, right? This is a real card in the game. Don't you think that's a bit of a problem? And I have another example here, Cabal Talon Priest. What a stupid card. It's like, Priest needs some help, so let's print a card that should cost almost twice as much mana as it actually costs as an early game card. Funny enough, Priest didn't actually make it very well in ranked mode because the other aggressive decks are just even more aggressive. That's another thing with design space, where when you compare aggressive decks to one another, the slightly faster aggressive decks, like almost always, is more efficient. So aggressive decks limit the design space of other aggressive decks. How fucking crazy is that, right? But this Cabal Talon Priest card did a good job of absolutely screwing over Arena. If you play against the Priest, they're going to have like 5 of these, and you're going to lose just because they have 5 of these. And then if you're like, oh wow, that's cool, I want to play Priest, and then you realize the measure of your success with Priest is just how many of this one card do you get. These cards are not interesting. They're not very well designed. They're just blatantly broken to try to salvage some of the, kind of levels and playing field of all the different classes. I would rather we'd have few classes being played in the meta, and the decks that they're actually playing be interesting, thought-provoking, and, generally reward good play rather than good opening hand RNG from aggro matches. Yeah. So that's generally the problem. So what solutions have we had so far? So in this expansion, I talked about the meta being absolute crap in ranked mode about after playing for about 1.5 weeks. I realized the meta is going to be the worst ever. A lot of people disagreed with me, and I just told them, you guys are in the honeymoon stage, you guys don't know what you're talking about. I played against like 5 Pirate Warriors, and I know this is going to be it. It's not really going to change. And this is something that Blizzard basically refuses to believe. Blizzard will be like, okay, so everybody's playing Pirate Warriors and Pirate Shamans right now. We're about 1 week in a very critical expansion that we just launched, and there's a huge amount of hype. What should we do? And it seems like their course of action is, let's wait like 2 months and see if something changes and gets spun in the meta. Maybe the meta will change, and maybe it'll be really interesting with, maybe control decks will come and beat it. No, that has never happened. It's never happened. Hearthstone has been a game for like 4 years, and the meta has never drastically changed after the first few weeks of an expansion. It's changed maybe a little bit, maybe like, a deck has come in, but like the super dominant decks have always just been the super dominant decks. And that's really about it. Waiting waiting is just bullshit. You can't expect the game to fix itself from people playing it. People playing the game have refined their skills and refined their play styles, their deck building to the point where the good decks are obviously being drawn out right away, and waiting for that to change is much less likely to happen now than ever, and it's never happened. So yes, patching is basically too slow. There's been a lot of developer insight posts and crap. There's been 4 of them in the last 2 weeks. And, that's kind of cool. It's kind of cool to see some feedback from the devs. But you really have to back that up with actual changes. If twice a week, you make designer insights and write a post about what's going on, but then you don't actually do anything, then it completely undermines the value of doing designer insights. Kind of designer insights we're thinking about doing this, and then you do some of that. And then you make another one, we're thinking about doing this. And then you do some of that. But if you're always thinking about doing stuff and do absolutely nothing ever when the community is desperately asking for it, well, that's a little bit problematic. I mentioned that there's going to be a balance patch at the end of this month, and because of the expansion cycle is usually between 3 and 5 months, we can basically expect that the next expansion will not be here 3 months after the last. So the next expansion for actual real big changes is not going to happen in Hearthstone for a while. So the meta as we see it will probably stick around a lot longer than you would like it to. My main solutions for this problem are that you just have to make constant balance changes. They don't have to be good. They don't have to be great. There's going to be some understanding. If you're making balance changes every 2 weeks, people will understand sometimes you might not get it right. But if you make balance changes every 7 months, well, people are going to have pretty high expectations, and those are usually not met. So the real solution here is just change shit up all the time. You might get it wrong sometimes, but the fact that people will be exploring and have that idea, wow, maybe there's actually a deck out there that can beat all of this. Let me try this. Let me try that. People feel motivated to actually try things and explore Hearthstone and really learn more about the game rather than this is the game, this sucks, I don't really want to play it. You have to make constant changes in this game. That's just as it is. You also have to stop considering new players. Right now in Hearthstone, there really are no new players. There's no new people playing Hearthstone right now. The reason is the new player experience is absolutely crapped on in the last expansion, yet they're still making serious considerations for new players. If you want to make considerations for new players, get your existing players excited about the game once again. I was actually watching some of the videos that people were posting about Reddit about other games' development cycles, and Ghostcrawler, who now apparently works for League of Legends, had this quote to say: "Our first commitment to you guys who are super active, who are playing the game right now, we don't want to dumb the game down just for the sake of someone who may or may not come back to League after they've taken a break." Nice indeed. So really, yes, I understand Hearthstone has to be a simple game, but it doesn't have to be opening hand, coin flip, over by turn 4 simple. It can be, a little bit more complicated perhaps. And I think lastly is encourage other play modes. Blizzard has made its entire focus of Hearthstone ranked play in Standard. And that's what most people play, and that's what most people judge the game by. And that's what Blizzard is trying to do. They're focusing all of this on just that. And the funny thing is, that is actually the worst part of the game, but that affects how most people perceive the game. Despite Arena right now is actually pretty good. I would say it's certainly not in the worst shape. In Karazhan, it was the worst arena ever. Let's just get that out of the way. But Arena Run is actually pretty fun. I'd call it about average in its Hearthstone life cycle, but that is a hell of a lot better than people perceive ranked play these days. So why don't we actually, kind of hype up Arena? Why don't we have the World Championship of Hearthstone actually involve maybe some arena skills? Maybe involve some wild competition? Maybe every couple months your ranking in the wild ladder tends to matter. Maybe there's actually some incentive to play casual mode. Maybe we shouldn't actually remove the PvE adventures from the game when the game doesn't have enough PvE content. There's a lot of stuff that has to be rethought about the game. Right now, Hearthstone has captured about as much of the audience of, online card games as it can until it ups its game quality. So it can no longer be a game about let's dumb it down as much as possible to attract as many players as possible. The fundamental design of the game has to change for it to really be successful over the years. And I feel like it's not that hard of a thing to do. So that's kind of what I'm making this video. Give you guys my opinion out there and tell you guys that you guys should be hopeful, even though we haven't really seen shit for results in a long time. I don't think it's that hard to make really good and really impactful changes for the game. So, yeah. Let me know what you think. Hope you guys enjoy my little rant. Not exactly a rant. Okay, it's a bit of a rant. And I'll see you guys tomorrow.